when Pac died, if he really did, you know.
If he really died, what do you mean by that?
I mean, when I left that hospital, me and Pac was laughing and joking.
Was there
Imagine being shot multiple times, bleeding, surrounded by chaos, and still writing words that could shake the most powerful offices in America. That was Tupac Shakur. This story is not just about music, fame, or tragedy. It is about power, fear, and a voice that refused to stay silent. For 60 seconds, forget everything you think you know about Tupac's death. Forget rumors.
You know, everything was being archived and put into Pro Tools. And a very, very good friend, very close friend, he's family, Claudio Carini, who was the engineer. Claudio was also doing a lot of the transferring, and Claudio called me because he had engineered and mixed a lot of the posthumous Tupac stuff. So he had called me for the sessions on the Better Days album, and there was multiple producers on different songs, and it seemed like every song was really different.
Forget headlines, forget movies, ask one question instead. What happens when a young black artist speaks directly to presidents, federal agents, and
Well, I want to talk to you about another artist that you work with, and in this case, sort of an interesting posthumous working with them, I'm presuming, is Tupac.
Yeah.
And the hit song after, I think it was his first posthumous release, which was Thug Mansion.
Right.
Thug's Mansion.
However,
political systems that thrive on silence. Some say he paid the price for that courage. Tupac was not just a rapper yelling into a microphone. He was a reader, a thinker, and a writer who understood systems. Long before social media activism, he studied politics, police power, and history. He saw how poor neighborhoods stayed poor while promises kept changing names. Tupac believed words were weapons, and he used them carefully. When he spoke, he aimed high. He did not diss small targets. He questioned presidents, parties, and policies. That mindset made him powerful, but it also made him dangerous in a world that punishes truth at all. In 1996, Tupac was shot in Las Vegas and officially died days later. The world mourned, fans cried, and the industry moved on, but his voice did not disappear. 3 years later, in 1999, Tupac spoke again, this time not from the streets or interviews, but from beyond the grave. His posthumous album Still I Rise dropped with the Outlaws, and buried inside it was a song that felt different. It did not sound like entertainment. It sounded like evidence. The song was called Letter to the President, and it felt like a warning. Letter to the President was not metaphor-heavy poetry meant for charts. It was direct, clear, and uncomfortable. Tupac addressed President Bill Clinton like someone who felt personally betrayed. There was no fear in his tone. There was disappointment, anger, and clarity. He spoke about broken communities, police brutality, mass incarceration, and empty political speeches. Tupac explained that changing leadership did not change reality. The same pain stayed, the same violence continued, the same systems crushed the same people. It was not a song asking for help, it was a message calling out hypocrisy. What made this song different was timing. Tupac recorded it before his death, but it was released after. That meant listeners heard words that sounded prophetic. He spoke as if he already knew the outcome. He sounded calm, focused, and aware of consequences. Some fans believe this track alone placed a target on his back. Others argue it confirmed why powerful people wanted him silenced. Tupac was not hiding his frustration, he was naming names, pointing fingers, and refusing to soften his message for safety or approval from anyone. Tupac believed politicians only remembered poor communities during elections. He described leaders who promised change but vanished once power was secured. In his lyrics, he painted images of mothers crying, fathers imprisoned, and children growing up surrounded by sirens instead of opportunity. He challenged the Democratic Party directly, calling out their failure to protect Black Americans. This was rare at the time, especially from a mainstream artist. Tupac did not separate art from reality. For him, music was a report from the front lines, not an escape from them. The idea that Tupac wrote an actual letter to the president has fueled conspiracy theories. For decades, some claim the song itself was the letter. Others believe real written correspondence existed and caught federal attention. What is confirmed is that Tupac was on the FBI radar long before his death. Declassified FBI files show that he was monitored, investigated, and labeled as a potential threat. Not because of violence, but because of influence. Tupac could reach millions with one verse, and that scared institutions built on control and silence. The FBI has a long history of monitoring Black activists, artists, and leaders, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Malcolm X. Anyone who unified people and challenged power became a target. Tupac understood this history. He referenced it often. He knew speaking truth came with a cost. Still, he refused to mute himself. In Letter to the President, he sounded like someone who accepted consequences but refused regret. That confidence made his message stronger. It also made many wonder whether his death was truly random or carefully allowed. Officially, Tupac's murder remains unsolved. The story says it was gang-related, chaotic, and unfortunate. But many holes remain. Witnesses disappeared. Evidence went missing. Suspects walked free. Over the years, multiple people claimed responsibility, then retracted statements. Each new version created more confusion. For fans, this uncertainty feeds suspicion. Tupac was not just another victim. He was outspoken, political, and fearless. When someone like that dies under unclear circumstances, people naturally ask questions. Silence from authorities only makes those questions louder. Tupac survived multiple shootings before his death. He moved with intensity, urgency, and awareness. He often spoke about death in interviews, not with fear, but with acceptance. Some believe he felt hunted. Others think he knew time was limited. That awareness influenced his work ethic. He recorded music constantly, wrote endlessly, and spoke openly. Tupac behaved like someone racing against a clock only he could see. That urgency is felt in Letter to the President. Every line sounds like it needed to be said before time ran out. The conspiracy theories around Tupac's death are not just fan fantasies. They are built on patterns, history, and unanswered questions. Why was a politically outspoken rapper left unprotected? Why were investigations slow and incomplete? Why did authorities show little urgency? Some believe Tupac was more valuable silent than alive. His influence was growing. His message was sharpening. He was reaching beyond music into politics and public thought. For systems that rely on distraction, a focused voice like Tupac's becomes a serious problem. Even today, Letter to the President feels relevant. Police brutality still exists. Poverty still traps communities. Politicians still promise change during campaigns. Tupac's words aged like reality, not like nostalgia. That is why the song continues to circulate online. New generations discover it and feel shocked by its honesty. Tupac did not sugarcoat pain. He documented it. He spoke like a witness, not an entertainer. That is why his death feels unfinished. It feels like a conversation that was interrupted, not concluded. Some fans believe Tupac faked his death. Others believe he was intentionally silenced. Some think the truth sits somewhere in between. What matters is not which theory you believe, but why so many exist. Legends surrounded by truth do not create endless questions. Legends surrounded by secrecy do. Tupac's life, messages, and death are wrapped in mystery because transparency was never given. When institutions refuse to explain, people fill gaps with speculation. Tupac warned about this very cycle in his music repeatedly. Letter to the President was more than a song. It was documentation. It was frustration turned into evidence. It showed that Tupac saw himself as a voice for people who were never invited into political rooms. He spoke for those ignored, policed, and imprisoned. He believed art should confront power, not entertain it. That belief separated him from many artists. It also isolated him. Standing alone with truth is dangerous. Tupac stood there anyway, knowing history, knowing risks, and knowing silence was not survival. Today, Tupac's legacy is often reduced to fashion, quotes, and playlists. But his political courage deserves more attention. He was asking questions many were afraid to ask. He was connecting dots many pretended not to see. Letter to the President remains proof that Tupac's mind was ahead of his time. Whether or not there was a conspiracy, one thing is certain. Tupac was not just killed physically. He was constantly attacked for his ideas. And ideas, once released, cannot be murdered. Tupac once said he might not change the world, but he could spark the brain that does. That spark still burns. Every time someone listens to Letter to the President, the conversation continues. The questions remain alive. The discomfort remains necessary. Tupac may be gone, but his challenge still stands. Look at power. Question it. Speak anyway. Because history shows us something clearly. The most dangerous person is not the violent one. It is the one who speaks truth without fear, even when silence feels safer. The moment the beat starts, Tupac grabs your attention like your life depends on it. For the first minute, his words feel dangerous, honest, and impossible to ignore. This is the power hook. He speaks with the urgency of someone who knows time is running out. He makes you feel the pressure of police sirens, slow patrol cars, and constant watching. He describes law enforcement moving through black neighborhoods. The way guards walk past cages in a zoo. This opening shocks the listener because it feels real. It forces you to see how normal life can feel like surveillance. When you are born into the wrong system, Tupac is not trying to entertain you here. He is trying to wake you up. As the song moves forward, Tupac begins to explain why this constant watching exists. He talks about a system that never trusted his people from the start. He describes neighborhoods filled with talent, dreams, and hardworking people, yet stuck in deep poverty. He questions why Black communities remain economically destroyed. While the government always finds money for everything else, there is money for wars overseas, money for building more prisons, money for controlling people. But somehow there is never money for real opportunity. His tone is not confused. It is frustrated, sharp, and demanding. Tupac makes it clear that he is not asking for pity. He does not want charity or temporary help. He rejects the idea of handouts because handouts keep people weak and dependent. What he wants is payment through opportunity. He wants fair access to education, real jobs, business ownership, and long-term investment. When he speaks about the Secretary of the Treasury, he is making a bold move. He is calling out power directly. He is saying that the government owes his community something real, not apologies, not promises, but action that leads to independence and growth. What truly separates this song from others is how personal Tupac makes his message. He does not speak like an outsider looking in. He speaks as someone whose entire life is shaped by this struggle. He weaves his revolutionary heritage directly into the song, reminding listeners that resistance is part of his bloodline. When Tupac shouts out Tupac Shakur, his stepfather, he is honoring more than a name. Tupac was connected to the Black Liberation Army and labeled an enemy by the FBI. By mentioning him, Tupac shows he is not afraid of his roots or the way history judges them. This moment is powerful because Tupac understands how the system labels certain fighters as criminals instead of freedom seekers. He knows that once you challenge power, the system works hard to erase you or destroy your image. Yet Tupac refuses to stay silent. He proudly says he would ride for Tupac because loyalty and truth matter more to him than approval. This is Tupac choosing truth over comfort, even when it puts a target on his back. Then Tupac brings up Geronimo Pratt, his godfather, a former Black Panther who spent 27 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Evidence that could have freed Geronimo much earlier was hidden. His life was stolen by a system that feared his influence. Tupac does not mention this casually. He wants listeners to understand how injustice works at the highest levels. This was not a mistake. This was intentional. The system saw Geronimo as a threat, so it buried him alive behind prison walls. By connecting Tupac Shakur and Geronimo Pratt, Tupac draws a straight line between past and present. He is showing that the struggle did not end with one generation. It was passed down, learned, and lived. These are not random name drops meant to sound rebellious. Each name represents sacrifice, resistance, and pain. Tupac is telling the listener that his anger did not come from nowhere. It was inherited through experience, loss, and truth. Throughout the song, Tupac balances rage with intelligence. His anger is controlled, focused, and purposeful. He is not just shouting. He is explaining. He breaks down how police presence, economic neglect, and mass incarceration work together to control entire communities. He exposes how young Black men are watched, suspected, and punished before they are ever given a fair chance. He makes you feel how exhausting it is to live under constant pressure. Yet even in his anger, Tupac leaves room for hope. He believes awareness is the first step to change. He believes that once people see the truth, they can no longer pretend everything is fine. His words challenge listeners to question what they have been taught. He forces people to look beyond headlines and stereotypes and see real human lives affected by policy and power. One of the reasons
I interviewed like some family members, just distant family members who happen to live in Lumberton, and one guy goes, "Hey, do you want to tour the house? I'm the caretaker." And I'm like, "Oh." So I just ripped my pants on a fence for absolutely nothing. You could just take it. I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't even tell my wife." He's like, "Yeah." He drives me there. I'm literally inside of Tupac Shakur's house with the caretaker. She's died in 2016, so all her boxes are packed up. Here are her books, here are her stuff. And then he said something to me that like, he goes, "Do you want to see where Tupac is buried?" And I'm like, I don't, what do you mean? Because everyone knows Tupac's ashes were spread off the Pacific and Malibu. He's like, "Oh, yeah, no. He has a grave here on the property." I'm like, I didn't let on, but in my head, I'm like, wait, what?
Tupac's message still feels fresh today is because the problems he talked about never fully disappeared. Police brutality, racial profiling, economic inequality, and wrongful imprisonment are still real. New generations hear his words and realize that his pain mirrors their own. Tupac becomes a voice for those who feel unheard. He speaks for people who never had a microphone, a platform, or protection. Tupac also reminds us that resistance does not always look clean or safe. Sometimes it is loud. Sometimes it is uncomfortable. Sometimes it scares people who benefit from the system. He accepts this reality. He knows that telling the truth will cost him peace, safety, and sometimes his life. Still, he chooses honesty over silence. By the end of the song, it becomes clear that this is more than music. It is a statement, a protest, and a legacy. Tupac uses his voice as a weapon against injustice and forgetting. He refuses to let names like Tupac Shakur and Geronimo Pratt disappear into history. He keeps them alive through sound, memory, and truth. This song forces the listener to sit with discomfort. It asks hard questions with no easy answers. It challenges power without apology. Tupac does not offer a perfect solution, but he offers something just as important: awareness. He shows that real change starts when people stop accepting lies as normal. In the end, Tupac's message lives on because it is rooted in truth. He spoke for the broken, the watched, the ignored, and the punished.
Yeah, that's why it goes down to the chain snatching. When the people were saying, you know, when the people first tried to snatch the chain, rumor back then that it was a bounty on that chain, that Puffy was saying we want to put this chain in in our video, and that's why the guys try to snatch the chain, and they didn't get the chain, and that's why Pac really took off and just started, you know what I mean, and fighting Orlando, because Pac looked at it like, this is my beef now.
His words continue to travel through time because they were never meant for just one moment. They were meant to remind every generation that silence helps suppression, and speaking up, no matter the cost, is the first step toward freedom. Tupac also makes it clear that real freedom is not just about surviving. It is about living with dignity. He talks about how a system can keep people alive but still crush their spirit. When you grow up surrounded by poverty, violence, and constant police presence, hope becomes dangerous. Dreaming feels risky. Tupac understands this deeply, and that is why his words hit so hard. He is speaking for those who were taught to lower their expectations just to avoid disappointment. He explains how young people in these neighborhoods are judged before they even speak. Their clothes, their walk, their skin color become evidence against them. Tupac exposes how this mindset turns children into suspects and neighborhoods into battle zones. He questions how a society can expect peace when it invests more in control than in care. His message is simple but powerful: you cannot police your way out of injustice. Another important layer of the song is how Tupac talks about mental chains, not just physical ones. He knows that oppression works best when people start believing they deserve their situation. That is why he uses music as a tool to break that mindset. His lyrics push listeners to recognize their worth. He reminds them that being poor does not mean being powerless, and being watched does not mean being guilty. Tupac also challenges those who are comfortable. He speaks to people who benefit from the system and asks them to look honestly at where their comfort comes from. He exposes how silence is a form of support for injustice. By saying nothing, by looking away, people allow the same systems to continue hurting the same communities. Tupac refuses to be silent, even when it costs him peace and safety. As the song reaches deeper emotional ground, Tupac's voice feels heavier, almost tired, but never weak. You can hear the weight of generations in his tone. He carries the pain of ancestors who fought, were jailed, or were killed for standing up. At the same time, he carries the responsibility of speaking for the future. He knows that if he does not speak, the cycle will continue unchanged. He also makes it clear that change will not come from one song or one voice alone. Tupac is not presenting himself as a savior. Instead, he is acting as a messenger. He is passing the responsibility to the listener. He wants people to question, to learn, and to act. Even small actions, he suggests, matter when they come from awareness and courage. By the end, the listener understands that Tupac's anger is rooted in love. Love for his people, his family, and his history. His frustration comes from wanting better, not just for himself, but for generations he may never meet. That is why his message feels timeless. It is not tied to one era or one event. It speaks to any place where people are controlled instead of supported. This continuation of the song reinforces why Tupac is remembered as more than a rapper. He was a storyteller, a historian, and a truth teller. His words still echo because they were never meant to fade. They were meant to challenge, to inspire, and to remind the world that real change begins when someone is brave enough to speak, even when the system tells them to stay quiet. Tupac's voice also carries a warning, not just to the system, but to his own people. He understands how anger can turn inward when there is no clear direction. He talks about how frustration, when ignored for too long, can explode into violence within the community itself. This is something that hurts him deeply. He does not want his people fighting each other while the real causes of their pain remain untouched. Through his words, he encourages awareness, unity, and self-respect as forms of resistance. He speaks about how the system benefits when communities are divided. When people are busy surviving, blaming each other, or stuck in fear, they do not have the energy to question power. Tupac wants to break that cycle. He uses his platform to educate, not just to express emotion. His lyrics feel like lessons learned from the streets, from history, and from personal loss. Every line feels intentional, like he knows this might be one of the few chances to say the truth out loud. Another powerful part of his message is how he exposes the illusion of equality. On paper, everyone may look free, but Tupac shows how freedom is very different depending on where you are born. He talks about laws that claim to protect everyone but are enforced selectively. He shows how justice feels very real for the poor and very flexible for the powerful. This double standard is one of the core reasons for his anger, and he refuses to soften it. Tupac also reflects on fame and visibility. He knows that being famous gives him a microphone, but it also puts him under constant watch. Just like the neighborhoods he describes, his own life
We don't really know if he really was part of it. Like Keefe D said that he was, he paid to get Pac and Suge, we don't know though. You know what I mean? Like I still gotta be just, even though if I don't really, hold Puffy in a high regards, or if I look at him a certain way, doesn't mean I can just openly say things that I don't know.
But the law
becomes a space of surveillance. The media watches his every move, waiting for mistakes, ready to label him dangerous or unstable. Tupac is aware of this trap, yet he continues to speak. He chooses truth over image, even when it damages his career or reputation. He understands that telling the truth often means being misunderstood. Some people hear his anger and assume he promotes violence. Tupac rejects this idea. He explains, directly and indirectly, that anger is a reaction, not the cause. The real violence, he argues, is poverty, neglect, racism, and silence. By flipping this narrative, he forces listeners to question what they have been taught to fear. Throughout the continuation of his message, Tupac emphasizes education. Not the kind taught only in classrooms, but street education, historical education, and emotional education. He believes knowing your history gives you power. That is why he keeps naming people, events, and experiences that the system would rather erase. Memory itself becomes an act of resistance. Forgetting, on the other hand, becomes another form of control. He also touches on the pain of betrayal. Tupac feels betrayed by institutions that promised fairness and protection. He feels betrayed by leaders who speak about change but never deliver it. This betrayal fuels his urgency. He knows that waiting quietly has never worked. That is why his tone feels so intense. He is not speaking for approval. He is speaking because silence would feel like death. At the same time, Tupac shows vulnerability.
Do you believe Keefe D when it comes to Puffy? Like when he make comments and say that, Puffy was scared of Tupac and Suge, so he would use him as protection when he came to LA, and how Puffy put a bounty on a death row chain for $1 million.
Vulnerability. Beneath the anger, there is exhaustion. Fighting constantly takes a toll. He admits, through emotion if not words, that carrying this weight is heavy. Yet he continues because he knows someone has to. His honesty makes his message human. He is not a symbol. He is a man feeling real pain, fear, and responsibility. Tupac also addresses the youth directly. He knows young people are the most affected and the most targeted. He speaks to them as if he is both warning and guiding them. He wants them to see the traps before falling into them. He wants them to know their worth before the world tries to define it for them. His words act like armor, preparing them for a reality that is unfair but navigable with awareness. He reminds listeners that change is slow and often invisible at first. There is no dramatic moment where everything suddenly becomes fair. Instead, change comes from constant pressure, constant truth, and constant resistance. Tupac's music becomes part of that pressure. Every time someone listens, thinks, or questions, the system loses a little control. As the message continues, Tupac connects personal pain with collective struggle. He shows that individual suffering is never isolated. One wrongful arrest, one lost opportunity, one broken family is part of a larger pattern. By connecting these dots, he helps listeners understand that their pain is not a personal failure. It is a result of design, not destiny. He also challenges the idea of neutrality. Tupac makes it clear that in a system built on inequality, staying neutral means supporting injustice. He forces listeners to choose a side, even if that choice is uncomfortable. His music does not allow passive listening. It demands engagement. Near the end of this continuation, Tupac's message feels almost spiritual. He talks about legacy not just in terms of fame, but in terms of impact. He wants to be remembered as someone who tried, someone who spoke, someone who refused to accept lies as truth. He knows his life may be short, but his words can live longer than him. He understands that systems fear voices more than weapons. That is why voices are silenced, mocked, or criminalized. Tupac refuses to let his voice be controlled. Even when misunderstood, even when attacked, he keeps speaking. That courage is what makes his message timeless. In the final feeling of this extended message, Tupac leaves the listener with responsibility. Not guilt, but responsibility. He shows that awareness changes nothing unless it leads to action. Action can be as small as learning, questioning, or speaking up. It can also be as big as organizing, creating, and rebuilding. Tupac does not limit what action looks like. He only insists that silence is not an option. This is why Tupac's words still matter. They are not trapped in the past. They move with time, adapting to new struggles while staying rooted in the same truth. His message reminds us that systems can be challenged, narratives can be changed, and voices can survive even after bodies are gone. In the end, Tupac is not asking to be admired. He is asking to be heard. And by listening deeply, the listener becomes part of the story, part of the resistance, and part of the possibility of real change.